the regularly scheduled Arts, Entertainment, Parks, and Los Angeles River Committee at City Hall. I am joined by my colleague, David Rue. We have quorum. Mr. Price is not going to join us today. He is unavailable due to a prior commitment. So with that, we will officially call this meeting to order. What I'd like to do, Mr. Rue, is take the multiple comment and general public comment cards first before we go to the items on the agenda. So having said that, that's what we'll do. And our first public and multiple comment item on the comment cards will be Armando Herman. So please step forward. And you have 2 minutes for agenda items and then 1 minute for general public comment.
For the record, I signed up as Herman.
You can start the clock, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, start the clock. You know, due to my transgender voice and my disability, the city of Los Angeles continues to have an issue with transgender voices. People with voices sometimes can talk very stern like this. Others can talk very feminine. But today I'm not on a feminine issue because my concerns is directed as to the policies and concerns to protect transgenders from detectives, from beating them up, from prosecuting their pimps. And the impact of transgenders community is not safe still. There are no amendments to regulate how police treat the transgender in our community because they say, speak right. And I try, but I'm just one of the many. And then, is this general public comment 3 minutes as well?
1 minute for general and 2 minutes for all of the items.
Oh, 3 minutes. Okay, so. Oh, then, in fact, regarding the sanitation report, use your other transgender voice.
Yes, regarding the sanitation report with the situation of hiring and firing of the new trash czars, the community is very upset regarding the high fees and costs and charges in their communities, and we want that to stop. We're demanding a public event with our loser mayor, Eric Garcetti. Now my general public comment. You know, I'm very glad that the courts ruled that, you know, sexual assault, sexual rape, or any type of sexual action can now be considered dismissed without prejudice. Because I recall when there was an elected official sometime in the city of Los Angeles who used a date rape under the Department of Building and Safety.
Mr. Herman, the topic has to be on the subject matter of the committee. So arts,
well,
entertainments, parks, and river.
Is dealing with the general public comment.
But general public comment related to the subject matter of the
of
committee.
Entertainment and Parks and River Committee.
So just stick to those topics.
So
then.
when you're being fucked for entertainment in the city of Los Angeles, isn't that part of sexual assault and sexual harassment?
It's not on topic, sir.
Yes, it is. When you go to the park or where you go to the art of parks, people are fucking with the use of no condoms. Am I right or wrong?
Our next commenter is Wayne Spindler.
No.
2 minutes
No answer,
on
sir.
the items and 1 minute on general public comment.
Is there a comment?
You're excused, Mr. Spindler.
Your time is up, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to ask the question about entertainment and parks.
Okay, dialoguing back and forth is disrupting the meeting, so that's your first warning. All right, that's your first meeting. Start the clock.
Yes. So
2
go ahead.
minutes for items and then 1 minute for general.
Yeah, that's it. So, item 1, go ahead. Yes, so we talk about the transgender pimp issue. And one of the things we want to make sure is that if you're being pimped out, are you being pimped out correctly and are able to get out of the relationship of the abuse? That is the question. Many people resort to having be fucked in the ass to get drugs. and then it turns into a change of gender and identity. Because one of the things that a lot of people like Eddie Murphy, for example, is they like a man to be a woman, and thus we call it a transgender. But what it really is sexual abuse. And when the time comes to get out of that abusive relationship, that's what the city should provide: safe houses. Yes, and a best safe house is with our gay mayor at the Getty House. So everybody should be able to
That's
go
on topic, sir.
to the Getty House to get their transgender advisory safety. Yes, it's a big house, and of course we know the mayor's transgender because he's fucking Glenn Dake while
You're
being
off-
married.
That's the second one.
Off topic.
So now we get to number 2. Of course it's off topic because I'm talking about your shit. Now, yard service master plan. Trash. First of all, there's a lot of trash in the room here that needs to be taken out. Now we have trash that are council members and trash contracts charging too fucking much money to take out the trash. Garbage is garbage, and it should be thrown out for free. So now we get to the general public comment. Yeah, so the general public comment is the fact that we go to these meetings, and after we're done speaking, the chair and his colleagues defame and place the speakers in the false light in violation of state law.
That's not on the subject matter of the case.
And the jackass that just spoke for the record is actually the city attorney enabling the violations. That's what's nice.
Your general public comment has to be related to arts, parks,
And
river.
it's related to giving public comment at the Arts, Entertainment, Parks, and River Committee, and this fucking fool tells me it's off topic. That's because he is an enabler. Just like Nuri Martinez is an enabler. Just like David Rue is an enabler. Takes an unconscious woman, tries to rape her. That's an enabler.
Sir,
And then
you're off
finally,
again.
we got the middle chair, and he's going to say the same thing.
The
I'll
record
beat him
reflects
to it.
It's been off topic.
Fuck
entire
you.
moment.
And you've been
Public
disrupting the
comment.
meeting,
It's
interrupting
been off
me.
topic and your time is
Rue's a rapist. Fuck you.
anyone who this is their first hearing at City Hall or first committee hearing of any kind, let me apologize on the behalf of the two jackasses that just spoke, because they don't have the character. They don't have the character to comport themselves like grown-ups. Now they're interrupting the meeting. They're interrupting a meeting. Interrupting a meeting. They're interrupting a meeting. So they get to have their express their First Amendment rights. Interrupting the meeting.
You're
You've been
interrupting
warned
the
many
meeting for the
times. I
record.
think it's time.
Yeah.
It's time to go. It's time to go. You're out of here. You're out of here.
There's no opportunity for dialogue during public comment.
Bye.
Continuing, for the record, they're continuing to disrupt the
So,
meeting if it's not
Let
showing
the
up on the
record
microphone.
reflect that they continue to disrupt the meeting. And ladies and gentlemen, this happens every committee hearing. This happens every day in council chambers by these same two individuals. It happens at every committee hearing at City Hall. And they get their jollies by using cuss words. All right. So they get their thrills by throwing out cuss words and disrupting meetings, and it happens at every committee hearing at City Hall, no matter what committee it is, and it happens every single day in council chambers. And it's unfortunate, but it's a First Amendment right, and they have their right to express themselves accordingly. Doesn't excuse their behavior, but that's the way it is.
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. All right. So what I'd like to do now, Mr. Morales, is welcome to the committee. First of all, thank you so much. We'd like to take item number 1.
Item number 1, Mr.
We have
Chair.
a real meeting now.
Item number 1 is a Housing and Community Investment Department report on behalf of the Human Relations Commission and Transgender Advisory Council relative to city processes and policies concerning and concerns that directly impact the transgender community.
Thank you. And there are no comment cards on this item specifically, so we will hear from the Transit Advisor Committee and also Mr. Francisco, who is here, to give our your report, Mr. Ortega. What I'd like to do is have Karina Samala kick it off with your remarks, please.
Thank you.
Welcome.
First, let me extend my warmest greetings to all of you today who have shown your support and concern to the transgender community. I'm Karina Samala, like I stated, and I'm the chair of the City of Los Angeles Human Relations Commission Transgender Advisory Council. I would like to thank Councilmember Mr. Farrell and his dedicated, wonderful staff for guiding us in writing this report. Also, a very special thank you to Sandra Cervantes and HRC staff, Francisco, for all the invaluable assistance in creating this report. To City Councils Mike Boney and Paul Koretz, Nuran Martinez, for their continued support to the transgender community. In front is the report that describes the Los Angeles City policies that directly impact the transgender community. It also includes the request from HCLA, Los Angeles LC City, on behalf of the LA City Human Relations Commission and TAC, to the mayor and to the city council. The Transgender Advisory Council is a community-led body that advises the mayor, city councils, elected officials, and government agencies on issues most important to the transgender community. Although TAC is in its early stages, it's about 2 years now since TAC had been established. TAC has tirelessly advocated for the needs of the transgender community as well as gender equity and human rights. We have organized the transgender community to develop a voice to communicate with the city leaders, pressing issues facing our community. Future challenges are how TAC will evolve legislatively, continuing advocacy roles for the community. TAC will also focus on specific policies in the near future. This report before you exemplifies a unified effort in understanding the issues surrounding housing discriminations unique to homeless transgender issues. Last December, the City Council instructed Personnel Department also to work with us in assessing cultural sensitivity training that is needed statewide, citywide. I look forward in partnership with the city as transgender have many unique concerns as we live in fear of violence and need continued assistance with housing, employment, education, and health care. And thank you for all helping us to live with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your remarks. And Mr. Ortega, before you start, I want to frame this just a little bit, just in context with all of this. It was a few recent years ago that your Department of Human Relations Commission really envisioned this council. And I know through the support of the mayor's office and city council, my colleagues and I, in 2017, in December 13th, the city council approved a set of instructions for staff to review various city policies and procedures related to issues raised by the city's Transgender Advisory Council. These issues include a review of city policies used to manage and respond to alleged discriminatory practices related to housing vouchers, which really kind of bubbled up as a real issue in the community, homeless shelter practices for transgender individuals within the Los Angeles County continuum of care. Transgender sensitivity training for city staff really was an elevated concern. Funding opportunities that may be available for services targeting the transgender community, and the current process for monitoring legislation that impacts this community. So those are some of the big issues that the advisory council has been elevating the importance of. And so we're here to address those issues. And I think we're on our way to some really great ideas and memorializing those legislatively.
Yeah.
So with that, Mr. Ortega, if you could add.
Thank you for giving us that context. I was going to follow up Karina's comments by sort of creating that same sort of space. I also want to acknowledge that one of our other TAC members is here, James Nguyen is here as well, and he's been very active in addressing some of the homeless concerns for the TAC. So, but I wanted to, before I even start my remarks, I wanted to commend the committee for your patience. I think that you demonstrate tremendous restraint, and you do it in a way that tries to protect everyone's rights. And so I really appreciate that. To start meetings like that often is a little bit jolting and jarring, but thank you for the opportunity to be here anyhow. This report, as you stated, Chairman O'Farrell, was something that has been in the works literally for a few years. But I think that in the last year and a half, the TAC started meeting in March of 2015 as a body, as an unofficial body. Since that time, I think the leadership of Karina Samala has really brought this and elevated the issues that the transgender community faces on a daily basis, not only to the attention of the Human Relations Commission, but to the attention of the city council, and elected officials in general. This committee had instructed us, and we submitted a report in November of 17 that outlined some of the areas of concern that we were seeing, as you had stated. One that we didn't, get into in depth at that time was the health concerns. But as you know, with the transgender community, there's a lot of intersections between different things, and so there was the issue of economic development for transgendered individuals and job placement, and we've talked at this committee about the incredible challenges faced by transgender individuals to get jobs in general. But to be a transgender person already at a job or at a city job, sort of the challenges of that as well. So economic development and job placement and opportunities for transgenders was an issue that is constantly being discussed at the TAC. Additionally, we also talked about housing. Housing, as you know, is not only a transgender issue, it's a city-wide issue. But it seems that it impacts the transgender community, even more deeply. And so their ability to come from under the sort of the pressures of gentrification, the pressures of available housing or affordable housing, is tremendous for this population. Again, the other concern was public safety, and behind me sits a champion of the transgender community public safety apparatus, and that is Assistant Chief Grimala. And she has been every step of the way, lock in step with your vision of how to really address these issues. And so, public safety, she meets with the working group on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. I don't want to misspeak, but this group is really a group that's really advising us to, and TAC members are part of that. In terms of policy, how we're going to address the issues that prop up with public safety, how transgender people are treated by law enforcement at the community level, at the street level. And in addition to that, not housing, as we said, health concerns had also been a big concern in terms of where transgender people will go get health and health treatment or access to proper health care. But so since November, then we're here. You've asked us in November, hey, why don't you look at these areas, come up with recommendations. And so what we've done, you have a report before you that outlines, and again, I want to just thank Sandra Cervantes and Mara Berger and our team with under the Housing Community Investment Department and our unit that have really worked hard and tirelessly. I want to just take a step back in this process. Our department, the Housing Community Investment Department, is amazing at creating transmittals. They do it every day. They're professionals. I see the way they submit transmittals on a daily basis almost, and are at various committees. These transmittals that we submit to this committee are very different in that we are interfacing with personnel, we're interfacing with other departments, and that's a rare, so one of the skill sets here is that we're all learning about, and we're all really, I see our competency is growing, is how to collaborate interdepartmentally with each other to address the issues that affect all departments and so affect all people. So I want to thank the personnel department, number one, who's been at the table with us. I know Michael Gold is back here, and he's been a key contributor from that end. So I want to thank you, Michael, and also I want to thank folks from HACLA who've given this information, the AIDS coordinator's office as well, and other entities that continue to give us feedback, including the LAPD. So what you have before you is a breakdown of from the housing aid voucher situation that was brought up in November to the transgender homeless concern that we talked about. And remember that the focus had been in transgender sort of housing, and especially for emergency housing, things that continue to come up for us. And as you know, LASA is the body that sets policy for that and continues to be both county and city entity that addresses these issues. So there's been some movement there. Policies have been in place. What we now are looking at in terms of the housing is, anecdotally, we knew that there was a lot of this stuff happening, right? But we don't have the data to back up a lot of these claims. So what we've asked LASA to do is to sort of begin to give us more information and more data so that we can make real recommendations in that sense, right? How do we implement things when there's a policy that just thinking about this, right? The challenge of a transgender person who needs emergency housing that may be coming from a relationship situation and who now needs to be housed. If you're, say, a trans woman, where are you placed within emergency shelter? Are you placed with the men or the women? And so these are issues that, what population are you with? And then once you're there, say you are housed, one of the things James Wen always talks about is there signage or can there be a policy adopted so that transgenders or transgender individuals have their own space within these shelters? So a lot of questions still to be answered, but there's recommendations on this issue. I didn't get into the housing voucher initially issue, but that has been raised as anecdotally that, as HACLA opened up, after having closed it out for so long, there were 100,000 people throughout the city applied for Section 8 vouchers last year. Right. I mean, the tremendous need, right? And we don't know. They don't have a tracking mechanism right now to know how many of these were transgendered individuals. So we're asking perhaps maybe to compel HACLA to, not us, but asking council to compel HACLA to really look at capturing some of that data so we have a better sense of are the complaints that we are getting from the transgender community matching the numbers, and how big are those numbers so that we can make changes. Also with personnel, and this is key, and I want to address a couple of things. With personnel, we've been talking about creating a couple of things. And one is a compulsory online training to build competency for all city staff to really better understand the trans community, especially the sort of public-facing departments like LAPD or LA Fire or sanitation or any department that has a lot of interface with the public, having a more face-to-face, people-to-people training. So these are two different components, and personnel has been very open to discuss with us the possibility of having an online training component where the trans community members are able to, in a sense, direct the content of what that training looks like for the city, and then explore possibilities in terms of creating those modules so that then they're compulsory for every city employee. And then in addition, then having a follow-up to the departments that need more additional training because they have that face-to-face contact with the community. So those are and I know I'm missing a lot of things here, but in terms of the funding, I wanted to just emphasize that there's a few challenges here, structural challenges that we've been battling with in terms of the TAC and its sort of how it was created and so where it's at now, right? And I know Chairman Afero, that you champion the cause, this cause in large part because I think that you envision something here. I think you have a vision with your colleagues in the council that's really elevating this council to really be part of the city family in some way, so that their issues are also at the table with every other group's issues. And so in terms of the funding, we're exploring. The Human Relations Commission has a trust fund that we manage. It has no money in it, so if you're willing to give some money to it, that we'd be more than happy to accept anything. But we were thinking about possible ways, so that's why we coordinated with the Office of the AIDS Coordinator to figure out if there were a funding possibility, so that, say, Midnight Stroll, that is something that the TAC is currently pushing and really being engaged with, if there was a way to get funding, or that they, for example, the TAC is having a dinner discussion on public safety with Chief Gramala in March. If there's a way to fund their dinner or to fund anything that happens with that event. Other events just like that
Just a revenue stream.
a
To
revenue
do
stream,
things.
do
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah, events and
Exactly.
initiatives.
So we're exploring whether they would, what grants are available, what the city does, or if there's another path before we come to a legitimate sort of a space where the city is compelled to do it in a formal way. What's another path, right? So we're exploring that, and so that's outlined here. And then also we were thinking about, of course, really monitoring legislation. In terms of the, I know I skipped over, but in terms of the personnel, for example, Senate Bill 396, right, which now compels employers with 50 or more employees to have those supervisors have a training for that really focuses on transgender individuals. I think that the personnel had already met a lot of those requirements through personnel, but we wanted to build more, right? So have more, and so. But in terms of the legislation, that would just be like, say, Roy Morales has been gracious enough to say that the CLA will monitor anything coming from the state.
Right. And we get those reports. So
Right.
so this issue would be incorporated into that practice.
Yeah, and we would be equally as vigilant in terms of what legislation was not only at the federal level in terms of sort of HUD or anything that's coming down that affects directly the lives and the well-being of the transgender community. We would be right there with it as well, our staff.
Wonderful.
So while I touched on a lot of those, I welcome your comments or your. And by the way, I do want to also offer up that the LAPD, they're proactive, and so they've already engaged in.
And after, once I hear from all of you, I'm going to invite Chief Gurmala
Absolutely.
up to hear from her. I think she's going to add some really great context and
Yeah.
perspective to this, as she always has. So,
Yeah, it's like we don't need to really reinvent the wheel. There's folks that are already, been contributing.
and James, did you please weigh in?
He's our committee chair for housing.
Although I am the committee chair for housing, I would like to recognize certainly your office, Councilmember O'Farrell, has been so supportive of the Transgender Advisory Council of LA. But I also want to recognize Councilmember Rue. CD4 hosted a meeting with the LA Attorney's Office and invited, of course, LAPD to that meeting. It was a very productive meeting with regards to homelessness. We were very fortunate to have Captain Polka from the Hollywood station come at 11 p.m. on a Friday evening to Midnight Stroll, which is a program that was formed out of Chief Gramala's comments and Jasmine Creighton, our TAC member, and many other organizations that have come together to collaborate on that. And we're upon our one-year anniversary. So thank you very much, Councilmember Rue, for hosting that event. I also like to recognize Councilmember Price. He recently hosted an African dance event. Coming into a African-American space, especially as transgender LGBT people, we did an outreach at that event in which we brought transgender as well as LGBT African people to the event. And because of the relationship TAC has with Councilmember Price, he came and he greeted all of the individuals that were with this group. So I think outreach is deep. With regards to homelessness, what has happened is TAC member Alexander Fuller and I have participated in the Mayor's Days for Compassion workshop. It's a 3-day workshop. We've just started with workshop 1. He has made inroads into one group that was presented there. And we're reaching out to faith communities, including the Catholic community, and are looking forward to having a sit-down meeting with one of the sisters. With regards to, so Midnight Stroll, that's already covered. Housing development, we are still wanting to work with HCID LA, and we are also looking at private funders and seeing how that avenue pans out. And then lastly, TAC member Gia Oleas has been wonderful in working with Trans Can Work. It's outside community, but it is chaired or led by a council commissioner out of the Workforce Development Commission. And so we are hoping to do a collaboration with them there as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You know, James, as you're talking, I'm in my mind, I'm remembering a lot of the opportunities that our colleagues are engaging in. Last year, for the first time, Marquise Harris Dawson had an LGBT event right there at Crenshaw. It was a wonderful event. So I don't know, were you all there too? Was the TAC? Did you have representation there? But it's something. Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's
Yeah, we need more
right,
collaboration.
because it was a really great. It was an inaugural event. It was fantastic. I know that Nuri Martinez had a first ever Van Nuys event, a Pride event there, and I know that Venice Pride in Mike Bonan's district happened as well. So there are lots of opportunities to keep elevating the profile of equality across the board for everyone. Yes.
Regarding Councilmember Nuri Martinez, allow me to please acknowledge a transgender woman who had been in a shelter for 2 years, or I should say 18 months, did finally receive housing via prior housing choice voucher in her district. So thank you.
Fantastic. And then lastly, the DTLA Pride event, which is getting bigger and bigger. Only I think it's 3 years now. So the awareness across the city, the elevating the cause of full equality everywhere for every group, I think is in Los Angeles is going strong in the right direction. So that's just part and parcel of everything that we're doing here, just to underscore the importance of full equality and equal rights, no matter who you are, what group you may belong to, or where you're from. I mean, it's pretty basic, and in Los Angeles, we understand that for the most part. We have ways to come, though, even in LA and in the state, certainly the nation. But it's important, it's very important in Los Angeles that we set the tone, that we get it right, and that we set the tone and also set the example for the rest of the country to follow. In fact, there's never been a more important time to lay that gauntlet down for the rest of the country. We have a responsibility. It's beyond what we should and want to do. I think that we have an obligation and a responsibility in this city to set that example for the rest of us. And you all are such a deep part of making that happen. I think we've progressed by leaps and bounds in the last 2.5 years. And the recommendations are fantastic. And so for the first time, these ideas are becoming memorialized in reports. And now we're already taking a look at funding mechanisms to effectuate the changes. So that's a first, and that's wonderful. And I think that you're going to be met with a lot of support. I really do feel that. And so, without further ado, what I'd like to do is bring up Assistant Chief Gurmala. And as she's making her way up, I just want to say that behind every movement and initiative, it takes a force of nature sometimes, and especially from a city department that has inherited, in present day, has inherited a past, a history that's not so glorious. And just last year, we celebrated the 50-year anniversary of the Black Cat protests in Silver Lake. Wonderful. My goodness, how far we've come. So modern day LAPD, with the enlightened way of not just thinking, but behaving and effectuating practices, I think there's no better example. It's all of that is housed in one person right here with us today, and that is Assistant Chief B. Gurmala to say a few words.
Thank you so much,
you.
Chairman O'Farrell, Councilmember Rue. I just have to preface my brief remarks. The only real reason that progress has been made by the Los Angeles Police Department in LGBTQ matters is because of an openness to learn, an openness to be educated by those that are going through the experiences of homelessness, the experiences of discrimination, disparate treatment, all of the above. And I think only when the department took a pause and was able and willing to learn and listen did any semblance of progress take place. The reason I'm here today, not only to support Francisco, the HRC, Karina, and James, the TAC as a whole, in partnership also with the LAPD LGBTQ working group, is the education piece that was a part of the discussion here today. The LAPD recently, last year, received post police officer standards and training approval for a course that was designed by Jules Sohn and members of Drian Juarez, members of the LGBT Center and the TAC, in coming up with a coordinated approach to ensure that everyone having the face-to-face interactions of which Francisco discussed was using proper verbiage, with the proper understanding, knowing the history of discrimination faced by the LGBTQ community so they could better effectuate service to the community as a whole. And this course is something now that the LAPD is going through, that we are ready to export to other police agencies. I believe Santa Clara County just recently has reached out to us. We have given this training to the libraries, because the libraries came forth and said we would like to improve it. But my offer here today, and I've discussed it a bit with Francisco, is since we do have a course and we do have some credibility in that course only because we have had community input and the teaching mode of the course is done with the community. This is not a LAPD. We're imposing what we think this training should be. It's going to fall flat, and it's going to have no legitimacy and no depth. But what I'm just offering here today is our partnership and our willingness to partner to assist and support in any way, any part of a training program that the city would like to roll out. And again, with deference to the community, the concerns, and the messaging that they would like to see. So I just wanted to offer that up today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much, Chief Gurmala. So I am going to have a few questions, and I know we have someone from personnel. We have someone from the CAO's office here as well, I believe. Yes. So if you could make your way forward, that would be terrific. We might have to do some change outs or not, but everyone's welcome. Yeah, or just stay close by. So perhaps the CAO's office, your personnel.
Yeah, I'm personnel.
Anyone from the CAO's office here to answer questions? No? Okay. So what I'd like to do is just ask you then, sir, what it will take to implement an online mandatory training program for city personnel. What would that entail? And then with that, the process of interacting with the TAC on helping to design that program to be advisory on that.
Okay.
And funding option, thoughts.
So I'm Michael Gold with the Personnel Department. We have to explore all of the different options. I think we need to look at whether it would be something that we develop ourselves. We have the capability of doing that. Whether we have a vendor develop it for us, or whether we can find an off-the-shelf course and just license it and get it done quickly, not reinvent the wheel. So we haven't done that work yet. As far as working with TAC, plan to. We really don't have another. We don't have any other way of really understanding what needs to be in the training. So we're going to rely on them, and we've met with them as a group to start those discussions.
Terrific.
And whether it's a mandatory course, I think is another question. If it's mandatory for all city employees versus certain city employees, we have to look into that as well.
It sounds like a good start would be to take a look at the off-the-shelf courses that are on the marketplace and then get some feedback. And that could be a first step that could lead into the next steps, whatever they may be. If it's woefully insufficient, then that's something else. Or if it's like, hey, this isn't bad, but our recommendations to improve it would be the following. So that would be a good initial conversation to have, I would think.
Sure.
Yeah. That way, if the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented, then we won't reinvent it, but we can certainly improve it or refine it for our needs.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. This is a question in relation to authority. Is anyone from LASA here or HACLA? Okay, I think we may not have some of the right people for the rest of my questions, but so thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Gold. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Karina, would you like to say anything in closing?
No, I'd like to thank, like what I said,
Okay.
thank you. We need
Thank
all
you.
the help that we can get.
Yeah.
This is excellent. We're moving forward, I can see, and this is a great thing, helping our community. I thank all the council members in the city for doing this for us. Thank you.
You bet. Well, thank you. You exhibit a real spirit of volunteerism every day, not to mention courage, because this is your lives that you're putting out there.
Right.
You're kind of giving the example of who you are on how to effectuate change for others who will never have the benefit of knowing your own sacrifice. And that's really a beautiful thing. That's integrity. So we
Thank
really
you.
applaud your
Thank you.
efforts
Thank
and
you.
your participation. Yeah, thank you. So the recommended actions, Mr. Rue, I would suggest approve HCID's recommendations as outlined in the report with an additional instruction in relation to the AIDS Coordinator's Office. So instruct the AIDS Coordinator's Office within the Department of Disability with the assistance of the Trans Advisory Council and the Human Relations Commission to report on current and future funding opportunities for the transgender community. So just we'll follow this line of exploration and identifying ways forward in relation to funding and effectuating the kind of change that is inevitable, especially if we give it a little push. So yeah, without objection, that'll be the order, and that will do that one. Thank you so much. And so that brings us to item 2. Mr. Morales, would you please read the item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 is a joint report from the Department of Recreation and Parks and the Bureau of Engineering relative to the Central Service Yard Master Plan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as the panel is making their way forward, actually what I'm going to do to the panel is what we'll do is before you assemble, actually if you could take a seat nearby, I'm going to just make some remarks, and then we're going to have take public comment cards after that. What I want to do is just kind of give a little bit of background about the feasibility study that I called for in 2014. This plan represents a roadmap to implement the vision to revitalize an underutilized area adjacent to the Los Angeles River, while at the same time modernize the facility and optimize its operations, which really need that improvement. This phasing plan is a strategic path that defines the proper sequencing to implement the overall plan to allow Recreation and Parks operations to continue on site with minimum interruptions. A rough order of magnitude cost estimate is provided for each of the phases to serve as a general guideline to seek the necessary funding for the implementation of this plan. As I mentioned, I introduced this motion nearly 4 years ago, April 25th, 2014. The Central Service Yard in North Atwater Village had historically been in the 4th Council District, but through the redistricting of 2012, all of Atwater Village with the exception of one little slice south of the 2 freeway, and everyone knows what that one is in the 13th district. Now, it was excluded from all of the federal studies for funding, called the Arbor study is the big one. But it, as one of the largest riverfront parcels, it's 24.6 acres. It was a lost opportunity to take a good look at it. For years, I won't speak for my predecessors, I'll only speak for myself, but we've seen the Central Service Yard right next to the LA River be underutilized. As I mentioned, it's 24.6 acres of, and a good portion of that real estate is essentially a junkyard with a fence wrapped around it with junk piled high. And you see it when you walk down the river. I have always felt there's a better use, river adjacent, a good public use for that property, which is why I ordered the feasibility study by council motion in April of 2014. Instructing the BOE to issue an RFP for consultants to prepare the feasibility report on the possible consolidation of the department's service yard to better serve the needs of the department while optimizing the abundant river frontage on the east bank of the Los Angeles River. You know, this is just another step in revitalizing the river and making it more accessible to people who live and recreate along the river's path. This is on the heels of tens of millions of dollars of investment already to make whole that vision at the Los Angeles River. And this 24.6 acre parcel has become part of that vision by virtue of it being city owned. And that's a really important piece. Rios Clemente Hale was retained to conduct an in-depth meetings with Recreation and Parks staff, since it was an on-site consolidation of the Recreation and Park facilities, and take a look at how that could free up some public space on their pressing needs, resource requirements, and any inadequacy on the site. Rios also provides a number of schematics that include the freeing up of the river frontage with park and possible community resource space. The next steps will be to engage the CAO and the CLA in providing possible funding sources for the department's needs and the implementation of a river improvement overlay or Rio-friendly river park and possible river center. I want to be very clear that there seems to be some sort of confusion out in the community from some quarters that this is some sort of master plan that is signed, sealed, and delivered, but it's not. It's a feasibility study to consolidate practices that the city Recreation and Parks needs to do and freeing up public space so that we can then have a community process to see what kind of improvements we'd like to see next to the Los Angeles River. And that's what this is all about. Once funding is identified, we'll embark on that community engagement process, help envision the future of what could be an expansion of the Riverway. That's to the north of this facility in the sanitation yard in the North Atwater Park, tying together this important piece of river frontage. You know, there's a connectivity at work here in terms of the incoming bridges that will connect the Glendale Riverwalk with North Atwater Village on the east side of the river, the new bridge that will be breaking ground fairly soon, getting horses safely across the river. And so this is all an effort to bring to use river-adjacent property. So I just wanted to put that out there, that this is the genesis, and the report we're about to hear are these ideas on how to consolidate those uses on Rec and Parks property, and then to take a look at what it looks like it could be adaptive reuse for some of the facilities. It's very exciting. It's much, much more than a plot of grass. Believe me, folks. I received that letter. There's nothing about a plot of grass. This is a major, major new imagined reuse of river-adjacent property. So with that said, we'll take public comment cards, and we will then assemble the panel for the report. So we'll start with, is Mark Kenyon here? Mark? Oh, you're right there the whole time. I didn't see you. I was hiding. He's hiding in plain sight. So we have Mark Kenyon, followed by Carrie Sutkin, followed by what says AVNC Rep number 1. or rep, AV&C rep with no name. So, Mr. Kenyon, please.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Farrell and Councilmember Rue, for being able to speak on behalf of you today. So I'm here as the Executive Director of Northeast Trees. As you know, we've been active on the Los Angeles River for over 25 years. So first, we want to thank the Recreation and Parks Department for this report. We've been waiting for 4 years, so we're very excited that it's now out. Though we consider it to be a good start, so I was pleased to hear your comments about that. We do want to reflect this idea of the plot of grass idea that many of our community members are also have some concerns that this might become a master plan that would ink in stone if it were
feasibility study.
Yeah, the feasibility study, that it would that there isn't now going to be the process for the public to have input into and to maybe modify this plan. So we would first advocate two things. One, that some outreach similar to what's happening with the G2 parcel or other parcels along the river be undertaken by the city to collect input about this feasibility study. And then finally, we would, as always, advocate on behalf of the council funding the Recreation and Parks Department. We think one of the reasons it took this long to come out, and one of the reasons why there hasn't been public outreach up to this point, is because we have, as a city, meaning all of us, through the recession, really hurt the Recreation and Parks Department the most. Thank you very
Parks loves hearing that, I'm sure. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kenyon. The next speaker, Kara Sutkin, and then AV&C rep. But just to say, there's been lots of public outreach about this issue. First of all, the motion was introduced 4 years ago. I've reported on it in person in Atwater Village. It's been in Mary Rodriguez's monthly report for the past several years. There's been lots of public outreach on this event. It's just that we're just now ready to hear the report, and we're very glad of that. So we have Carrie Sutkin, AV&C rep, and then Karen Barnett. But maybe AV&C rep and Karen Barnett are the same thing.
Well,
all right.
I wanted to have my own personal comments, and then I just have the community impact statement from the board.
Okay, so
I wanted to separate
but you
them.
just get 1 minute though per individual. Yeah.
For
yeah.
For the board, I want to read our statement, but as an individual, I want to go back and get my paper. I'm coming as the board.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and get your paper, and we'll hold off for you so you can bring your paper up. And Kara, and then Therese Dietland, you'll be after Karen. Oh wait, Carrie Sutkin.
Hi, council people. How
Hello.
are you? I am a resident of Elysian Valley, but I'm been very interested in 24 acres of parkland, or what I thought might. I mean, it's owned by the park department. I know that a lot of the community folks understand that this was part of the Griffith Park donation, so I think there is expectation, even from the LA River Revitalization Master Plan 10 years ago, that there would be some kind of public open space. So I look forward to the final. I think what's confusing, Mitch, is it says master plan on the document. It says master plan on the agenda, and the innovation technology funding was for the preparation of a site-specific master plan, $200,000. So I thought we would see a feasibility study too. I've been one of the people asking to see it. So this is a good start. I just wanted to say 20 seconds that this feels like it kind of represents kind of where the Parks Department is today, and I just hope that this reflects kind of the future of where parks goes, and so it doesn't take up all the space for that kind of a public use, because we have so many public users on the river. We need parks and parking and maintenance too.
Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
so this is my personal comments. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Carrie said to make it more time right. And we were expecting a feasibility study, not a master plan, but we have to go with the language that exists. So the community input and and outreach needs to be addressed before there can be a quote-unquote master plan, and that is mentioned in the interdepartment memo, item number 5. There's a nice schedule for that. And this is in a super sensitive neighborhood in our area. There's a new bridge coming. There's the equestrian community. There's Griffith Park land, proposed development of 4,000 Chevy Chase, and high-speed rail will most likely close Chevy Chase Drive. And of course, any building would be done in a floodplain. So that is also a huge issue. So I thought at the initial discussions we'd have more land than 5 acres, and there would be a consolidation. And I think there's some opportunities with high-speed rail and other city properties to maybe move some of the central service yard buildings or other properties they own to another site.
Okay, I'll tell you what, Karen, before you go, Therese, so the community impact statement, so we'll You
Yeah,
hear that?
absolutely, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. I was just going to say let's keep it separate for the records, so have that public comment and then have the community impact statement.
I can come back and read it later. if
So,
you
no,
want.
that's okay. Was that your public comment then?
Yeah, that's my.
So
that's
that
my-
was public comments.
Yeah.
So now let's have the community impact statement. And,
Okay.
and is,
I'm gonna do
how-
my best to
2
read it
minutes?
with-
Is good? Okay, how about 2 minutes on the community impact statement?
Sure, it's just
Yeah.
one sheet.
Okay.
Okay. The Atwater Village Neighborhood Council had a meeting and approved the statement last night. So the Atwater Village Neighborhood Council is opposed to the Central Service Yard Master Plan report submitted by the Department of Recreation and Parks and the Bureau of Engineering for the Central Service Yard located at 3900 Chevy Chase Drive. Despite repeated requests for community input, including submission of community impact statement on March 17, 2015, requesting stakeholder input and inquiries with CD13 office, zero community outreach was conducted in the formulation of this master plan. As pointed out by Council Member Mitch O'Farrell, whose district includes Atwater Village and the Central Service Yard, in his motion passed by the Arts, Parks, Health, Aging, and River Committee on April 25th, 2014, the CSY Yard sits on prime riverfront real estate. The consolidation of current utilization to follow for space for public use for enjoyment represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to give residents and other stakeholders a true stake in the revitalization plans of the LA River. Sadly, almost 4 years later, a master plan has been developed with a price tag in excess of $300 million without any community engagement or involvement whatsoever. It appears for that princely sum, the public will get a plot of grass. In fact, the master plan highlights a missed opportunity with an approximate 4,000 square foot warehouse, which could be repurposed for community use, but $0 are allocated for any such work. RAP and BOE missed the first step of community engagement, and now the project has gotten off on the wrong foot. This committee should instruct RAP to work with the AVNC, residents, and other stakeholders to revise the master plan to include community input as to the future use of the CSY Yard property, which is in Griffith Park land grant, and to truly utilize the potential of this quote-unquote prime riverfront real estate.
Thank you. Thank you. And just for the record, anytime a city department or agency does a sort of takes a look at consolidating, there is no neighborhood council process to that. It would be like when the police built a new administration building. That's similar to what Rec and Parks did with BOE on the Chevy Chase site. So there is no public process with a community group or a neighborhood council when they're taking a look at internal consolidation of their facilities, which my motion called for. So that's whole and solid. That's right there. The piece where there will be a community process is let's take a look at what kind of properties, what kind of real estate that frees up for community use. That's where a community process will take place. But my office has, in fact, for the last nearly 4 years, updated the community on a regular basis about this feasibility study. We're just now to the point, after we hear their presentation from BOE and Rec and Parks, about next steps, which will include a robust community process on how do we bring this to life for the public. What is that going to look like? That will be a process driven by my office, your council member, elected to represent the 13th district. Just want to put that out there. So thank you. Therese.
Thank you. I second everything Karen said. We didn't have a lot of public outreach, and if it's worth anything to you, I'm an immigrant here from the Midwest, where you walk 3 feet and you trip over a stream, and I moved into Atwater, and I'm a block and a half from the river. I love the river. I love everything it stands for, and I lived there for quite a while, and all of a sudden I said, LA has a river? And everyone I have told this to from back east can relate, because we don't ever hear about the LA River unless you're in LA and you live a block and a half away from it. So anything we can do to preserve it. And Mitch, I'd love to see much more public outreach on this. We've got all this stuff going on, and also take into consideration the equestrian center there, because that's a very vital part of the community. So all of this has to be integrated. Okay?
Thank you,
But
Therese.
thank you for what your guys are doing. I love it.
Thank you.
The river. LA has a river? Yes.
That's right. Thank you so much. And I'll restate again, when we actually have that conversation about how are we going to activate, how are we going to program, how are we going to build this open space, how are we going to improve it, there will be a very, very robust process. But we haven't had anything to work with yet. This, for the first time, gives us something to work with. So I just want everyone to understand that. All right, our next, that's it? No more speakers, right? Okay, so we're good. All right, so thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who comes to City Hall, makes the trek here to give your input. We love that. We appreciate you making the time to come here and give public comment, so we appreciate that. All right, we now have BOE and Rec and Parks for the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members.
Good
Kathy
afternoon.
Santo Domingo, Superintendent Recreation and Parks. With me this afternoon are the team from Bureau of Engineering, Paul Sang and Lillian
Council
Caruso.
members.
We also have our Superintendent for Griffith Park, Joe Salisis,
Oh, wait, Joe.
along with Rios Clemente Hale. When the motion was first introduced in 2014, and I read through it, I live about 3 miles away from CSY, and I kind of said, you know, what a great idea. This is fantastic. You know, I have a 4-year-old, so she was about a year at the time, and I said, wouldn't it be nice to have a river? But then I put on my Rec and Parks hat, and I said, what a challenge. What do we have there? I'm relatively new to Rec and Parks at the time. I was about a year into it, and everybody referred to it, well, that's the central service yard. So really, in trying to look at this feasibility study, we had to understand what's there. And then the question that we posed to Bureau of Engineering is, how do we move this forward and still be able to respond to all of the various items that we have there? So kind of just a brief summary of what we have there. We have our golf division that's there. We have our admin we had our admin staff from Metro that does all of the parks operations within the site, and we'll go through that in the presentation. But the meat and core, and how everybody refers to it as the maintenance yard, it is, in essence, the biggest yard for the department. You know, our roofers, our playground equipment folks, all of the various people that respond to the various needs of the 450 parks come from this site. So it is quite massive. I think through the years, it grew in such a flat way that it spread over this 24-acre. So really the idea from the department's perspective is, how do we push all of these trailers and the admin building and all of these parking spaces into a well thought out area that we can still function and we can still respond to the community's needs, and at the same time accomplish a goal of freeing up the space for this river adjacent park. Like you mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's really the idea of what can we do, what are the limitations, so that we can intelligently move forward. I share everybody's concern. I agree there was no outreach effort, but really this is the city family trying to understand what we have, so that when we do go out to the public and to the community, we could speak intelligently about what's there. You know, we didn't know it was there. Honestly, there were a couple of trailers that we found out it shouldn't have been there, and it probably was forgotten. Somebody must have retired, and that agreement is no longer usable, and it should actually facilitate removing that particular trailer from the site.
You never know what you might find when you start kicking things around. Huh? Yeah,
Well,
that's good.
But at the same token, we did find some very useful items. There are trailers located on site from the Red Cross for emergency response. We also have a Public Works Street Services yard that's also on site. So these are all items that are there, as well as general services. The facility grew to where it is right now, and this is understanding how we could move it forward.
Sure. Thank you. That's a great preamble to this. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
Paul Sampier of Engineering. Good afternoon, council members. So just want to echo what Kathy has stated. So this is really represent our effort. Call it a step zero. This is just a phase where we do very preliminary fact gathering and just documenting what's existing out there and all the issues that we have to overcome and deal with, and then coming up with a very logical roadmap to take us to where we want to be, so we can work with the officers, with the community, to achieve our ultimate goal, and then to how to maximize the open space for the community, and at the same time, modernizing the CS5 facility, and then without or minimize the Lincoln Park's daily operations at the yard. So that's how it goes.
Terrific. Thank you.
So I'm Greg Kochanowski, a principal at Rios Clemente Hill Studios. Thank you, Kathy and Paul, for. I'll just go to the facts now.
Sure.
You did such a wonderful job with with the introduction and prologue. So there's quite a bit of material in the document. We'll try and roll through this relatively quickly until we get to the phasing, which I think is probably the most important portion to really understand. But as to give you an understanding of the extent of detail that we went through, first we did a kind of analysis on the 24.6 acres, and really it's about 92% asphalt right now, about 2% landscape, and 6% building footprint. And so as we go through look at how those ratios change at the end of the project, was something we were really trying to achieve from a heat island effect as well as just an overall sustainability effect. Everyone knows where the project is. Here it is in the red along the river. The site really contains upwards of, I think, about 15 or 16 independent parties that operate under Parks and Recs, or Recs and Parks, as well as forestry. There are shops on site that fix vehicles, do carpentry. There are children's after-school programs, after lunch programs. So there's a quite complex series of individuals, as well as storage, and the entire yard serves as the emergency response, really headquarters, if you will, for disbursement of vehicles and agencies during a response to an event, such as a flood or earthquake or what have you. So there's some overall shots and some of the existing fabric. Mostly it's trailers, really informal kind of storage buildings, all prefabricated structures. So part of what we looked at in terms of, we looked at the site now, as Kathy was saying, really to try and understand what is there. And so that went twofold. First fold was what are the physical qualities of the space, both in terms of the space as well as other factors that are affecting the service yard, and then programming. We met with each one of the different departments and took an inventory of what they have, and then what their future growth projections would be. This is the existing site with the large warehouse on the river, a series of warehouses and shops. These are the shops. We tried to maintain all the facilities that were in relatively good shape, and then reconfigure the others that are not. And you'll see that later. It is in Rio, so as was discussed earlier, looking at utilities through the site in terms of an existing sewer line and proposed sewer lines. Similar. Looking at monitoring wells that exist across the site. Again, really just trying to evaluate constraints and the facts that are on the ground. Similarly, I think it was mentioned 100-year floodplain. So we did look at the 100-year floodplain and tried to understand how it impacted the site. You can see here the LA River in yellow. This is the central service yard here. What is outlined in black, with a black outline, as we'll get to in a minute, is a future administration building which tries to consolidate the offices that are currently on the site. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a very intensive and multiple phase program outreach with each of those departments to really try and understand what the future needs would be, so that as we're forecasting how to consolidate, we can have a realistic perspective on what kind of open space, because the goal of this is really to open up a park along the river. And so how much space could we really get? This is a map just showing all the different groups, and colored in different colors where they reside on site. And you can see that red, for example, which is Recs and Parks, is spread all around the site, as are different kinds of departments. So as they're communicating with each other, they're walking across parking lots, and it's really quite inefficient. It's just grown up over the years into this kind of aggregated assembly. Also, what we looked at was how much parking there is. And there are two types of parking on the site. There's vehicular parking for people who work there, as well as guests. The public does come to this site to visit departments for permits, as well as a lot of heavy machinery and heavy vehicles. Currently, and so in terms of the transportation on the site, the circulation on the site, a lot of those heavy vehicles actually go down Chevy Chase Drive through the neighborhood. And so part of the goal of this was to really remove that traffic off of Chevy Chase and push it through the north end of the site, which will show a resolution of that. This is what happens existing, which is kind of a mess. So here is an inventory of existing trucks and vehicles. And then I'm going to roll through this very quickly because we're not going to bore everybody with all the numbers of each of the different departments, but just as a understanding of how many parking spaces they would need, how many desks, how are they growing in the future, how much storage do they have. We went through each of these different departments from emergency management, and we met with them on site as well as in their individual offices, forestry, so on and so forth. There's a lot of them.
Well, data's important.
There's a lot. So this really becomes the basis of a kind of program, really, a program document. Okay, so here's really the meat of the presentation. So getting into phasing. The goal of the phasing is twofold. Well, really, the primary goal of the phasing is to not disrupt the activities that are happening on site, and to also mitigate effects to the community that are adjacent. So as a first phase, what we were looking to do, there was a kind of linchpin moment of what would be the first thing that would then trigger all the other things. And so the first thing is to build a new administration building, which is a 4-story structure, approximately 60 feet high. This is all really ballpark. We're in very preliminary conceptual stages. But it would house about 75,000 square feet of office and a ground level of additional storage of another 25,000 square feet. So it would be 4 floors of 25,000 square foot footprints. Really, as we do that, what we would be able to do is then, we did some very schematic plans to understand what that would mean. From a ground floor lobby for the public to come into, the Griffith Park planetarium would actually, observatory would actually relocate here from their trailer that's currently in the LA Zoo parking lot. They have a lot of, they are the people who design all the really amazing graphics and simulations that you see at Griffith Park. And currently they're in a sort of a secured trailer at the zoo. And we would relocate them here and give them a proper headquarters and also a level of security, because the amount of equipment and the privacy of that, the intellectual property of all of that is important to protect.
About how much square footage? It's probably in the report, but a ballpark.
I think it's about 5,000 square feet, 3,500 square feet.
And would it be commensurate with the new site?
Yes.
Same square footage?
Yes, it would. Actually, I'm sorry. I think they're a little less than that right now, and we would build a little bit more because they were going to expand their program just by a few people. And then a typical office floor. You can see that in a diagrammatic portion here with 4 levels of office, lobby and storage, and some mechanical. The next phase then is once you build the building, it allows you to start really freeing up large portions of the site. So here is urban forestry, which is where a majority of the heavy equipment really resides against where people are walking. And so to get urban forestry out of here, as well as golf and some other miscellaneous administrative offices, not miscellaneous, but other administrative offices, they could then all move into the office building, and then that frees up this entire portion of the site to bring forestry and consolidate them along the edge. What that does then is that in relatively short order, probably around 5 or 6 in this overall process, is a new three-acre park that exists at the terminus of Chevy Chase Drive. So it allows a portion of the park, a significant more than half, to come online before completing the rest of the park. And that's really due to the additional consolidation and movement of departments around the site that still need to be done. This is the warehouse that I think is in question, and one of the reasons that this is maintained in this phase is that in the next phase, in this phase, what we're also doing is we're building a new parking garage so that we can take all the parking on site, vehicular parking for people who work there, as well as people who visit the site.
It's all scattered surface parking
It's
right
all
now.
scattered surface parking. You have people visiting the site that are driving where heavy equipment is, and so getting lost and so on and so forth. And so by consolidating that, we can do two things. We can get all those people away from the inner workings of the yard. We can also create a secured line so that people can't actually get back into the yard and create a safer experience for everybody. So we build a new garage. And that garage, as you can see here, just in a very diagrammatic form, this is the footprint of the office building. Those would work together, and there would be a way in which visitors could park along the street. Employees could then park in the garage. The lower level of this garage then would house some of the heavy equipment and get that out of the yard. The next phase is then to really address the warehouse. So the warehouse houses some of the old from the Figueroa Plaza fire, as well as other departments. And so we would take that material and actually move it into. We would move what's in the existing warehouse and consolidate that within the other existing warehouse along the river, and then build a brand new warehouse along the back. This warehouse would then be able to house not only the one we just tore down here in red, but also potentially the material that's in this warehouse as well. That would free it up either for, 1, demolition, or 2, repurpose. So there are options there. In the plan, we show it being removed, but there are opportunities for potentially being repurposed. And then a reworking of the shops to modernize them, create additional office space for additional employees.
Are those new structures, or are they just repurposed structures?
No, I'm sorry. These are existing structures that would just be modified and renovated. And then that's when this building, after that work is completed, then this building is then opened for whatever would happen to it in the future.
It could be adaptive or reused or demolished for park space or whatever.
Half and half,
whatever.
Whichever it is.
Got it. Okay.
And there's been no decision on that.
Yeah.
It's just, we're just talking about potential right now.
Right.
And then at that point, assuming it goes away, that would open up another 2.5 acres along the edge of the river. And the reason so you would essentially have about 4.5 acres that's contiguous as a larger parcel here. This gets skinny along just because it's constrained by the existing shops. But it's still quite robust. That's about 50 feet or so, 60 feet. So the final plan, just moving through this, we go from 2% to 23% landscape. We go from 6% to 18% building footprint. which sounds like an increase, but we reduced the overall hardscape and asphalt from 92 to 59, which is a significant reduction, we feel. This is a very broad, very general schematic overview looking at the extent of the park and the new buildings and structures that would be on site. This is the new warehouse. We're kind of flying above it like a bird. This is the new park along the river, parking structure, administration building, existing shops that are renovated on existing other machine automotive repair buildings, and a new structure for the playgrounds department. Whoops. What's also shown here, and I think will be shown in the plan as well, is the introduction of a green buffer between the neighborhood, the residences of the neighborhood, and the yard along the eastern edge of the property.
And does a buffer exist right now?
No.
There's no buffer right now.
There is no buffer right now. In fact, this parcel where the warehouse is going is a dirt lot. We have trucks beeping at 6 o'clock in the morning, waking people up. There is dust mitigation that is done.
And we're aware of some constituents who live directly adjacent to this who deal with the consequences of that activity.
So we are trying to fix that problem with this feasibility plan. So along this entire edge, we would have a green planted buffer that would shield from the activities of the yard. In fact, that's really how the park operates as well, is it shields people from the Riverwalk. It is an active place, of course, but it really landlocks the service yard now between buffers of landscape.
And speaking of buffers, the potential park space or green belt between the river and the renovated shops, is there a sound mitigation piece to modifying that building envisioned?
I don't know if we have not discussed that. Honestly, I think that's a good idea. A way of those are older structures.
Right.
They don't. They're industrial structures. But to the extent that we can provide sound barriers from some of the this line could also be a way of mitigating sound from that.
But in terms of if there is river or park use, being shielded from idling heavy equipment or sound or
for sure.
Yeah, that's
in fact a lot of the idling equipment we've moved. There's some automotive repair that happens all the way back along this edge. We're moving that actually away from the park and more central to the park, so you don't have automotive repair and other small machine repair adjacent to the riverfront anymore. Also, what you can see here, this is a kind of a diagram for circulation as well that illustrates heavy equipment coming only through, that's the dark blue line, heavy equipment only going up through the north and then into the site. And it's isolated along inside the new central service yard organization. And then red and purple are both visitor parking, or visitors. Purple is visitors, and then red would be employees, and those are both just passenger cars.
That's so interesting. So the access point for heavy equipment is essentially off of Colorado.
Correct.
In the extreme north part of the complex of facilities.
That's correct.
Okay, and right now is there an ingress egress at all?
There is. There is currently ingress and egress.
But it's unimproved.
There is a gate there. It's relatively unimproved. I think it's just that it's not. The master plan allows for some leakiness to occur. And so
if I could add to that,
Sure.
So to the north of CSY is actually sanitation, and it's a sanitation facility. Currently, we have access through that, and some of the employees do go through that particular driveway. It is a driveway access for Bureau of Sanitation. So as we move this feasibility study forward, we have to have a conversation with Bureau of Sanitation because there's nothing formal right now that allows for us to use that driveway.
All right. Thank you. Just some other logistical test fits of how trucks would actually be able to back up and park on site, and then another study in terms of using the rooftops of both the existing structures and the new structures for solar to get as much energy generation as possible on the site and make this as sustainable as possible with regard to the service yard. So here's a new plan. I think this is more or less where it ends, showing the configuration of the park, the new administration building, the parking garage, the new warehouse, the green buffer along the east in the neighborhood, and the light blue is what's been renovated. So really trying, and then the sort of secured zone for visitors and for employees to come up into the property. I think that's it.
Okay. All right.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go through that so quickly.
No, it's okay.
But hopefully it's
yeah,
relatively
it's all
quick.
right. And it's the first time that it's been thoroughly explained to me as well. So thank you for that. And so what we have is you've explored what consolidation will look like to free up some city-owned property for public use, and in this plan you've established a green belt that it doesn't exist currently between the residential area and the use at this facility, and you've also taken heavy equipment off of the residential streets and redirected them north through the sanitation property and other public facilities that aren't open to public use off of Colorado. So that's an added benefit that I didn't even anticipate. So that's exciting. And then you've envisioned some photovoltaic panels for regeneration of energy. And then left open the possibility of adaptive reuse for the one warehouse facility or not, depending on which direction this could go in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all of that is open to, would be determined in the next series of processes, would be the public process and CEQA, et cetera.
Terrific. Mr. Singh or Ms. Santo Domingo, anything to add after this presentation?
There's really nothing to add, but the big question to the department is what's the next step? How
Right.
do we move it forward?
And that is my first question. Next steps for a consolidation of the central service yard. What would that look like? What would the immediate resources be that you need to take this to a next step?
Yeah, the next step is really identifying funding to move it forward. I think with the initial funds that was received and bringing on board Rios Clemente Hill, this is as far as what that initial pot was able to move. Next steps would be really engaging with the public, doing the outreach and addressing the CEQA process. All of those conversations need to occur.
Right.
And there simply isn't a project funding at this point that we could say, BOE, let's go.
Right.
That is the challenge in order to move this project forward.
Okay, but at least we have this study. It's complete. We have something to work with now for the first time ever, and that's a good thing. So you're talking about funding sources. I know Terry Sawyer, I saw her walk in from the CAO's office. They might be able to identify some potential funding sources. Thank you and welcome.
Well, I don't have anything, and I did
Oh.
not bring anything in my magic bag today. Terry Stowers, CAO staff. Council member, our municipal facilities group is aware of this project and will be happy to work with your office, BOE, and Recreation and Parks to identify potential funding sources. I don't know if this would something that would be eligible for future bond funds, river money. I mean, there are multiple sources, but I would not want to commit us to anything without really giving us the opportunity to engage with all the stakeholders.
Right. What we've done is we've sort of created a launching point for a lot of possibilities, all
Yes.
depending on funding. I mean, and we're very poised to trigger our enhanced infrastructure financing district, which is something else that's been wending its way forward, and that's a long-term, 45-year funding stream for improvements at the river that involve infrastructure improvements, habitat restoration, park space, affordable housing. So that is a tool that I've been working on in concert with all these future possibilities along the river, and that's a conversation we can have as a interdepartmentally, as a community, amongst the city council. And that's a conversation that I welcome because we know that this property could be better utilized. And that was pretty clear in the study. So how does Recreation and Parks, how do you all feel about just the higher level of functionality, which I would think that's a good thing that you're interested in pursuing, not just because I did this motion 4 years ago necessarily, but it's not a bad thing, right, in terms of adding efficiencies to the way city departments function?
Absolutely. We've always looked at this yard as it grew too fast, and
Right.
so it's a series of trailers that are connected.
Just,
Certainly having everyone consolidated and having it be well thought out, that would certainly create efficiencies. Some of the complaints in this process, in terms of what we currently have and what could be achieved, our neighbors are very unhappy with us. I receive, numerous phone calls in terms of that beeping sound, or just, the various trucks that drove too fast. And the reality of it is we're accessing through a residential area. It's single-family dwellings. So I think this master plan addresses some of the concerns that we have, and certainly as we move forward, the department can certainly adapt what could move forward, and it could be a better place for the department in that area.
Terrific. I would hope, we have some community members here, I would hope that the community members who are here would support this launching place that we're at, because what I've seen so far, I think, holds promise. With that said, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, David Rue. Questions or comments or thoughts, Mr. Rue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this project for the many years, and not just for this project, but for the LA River. There's a lot of exciting things going on. When I first heard about it, I thought it was just a park, but it looks like it's a functional. It's not a park. It's as it says, a service yard with an opportunity to build some green space, which is very promising. This is something to look forward to, and I'm very excited about. But I do have a few questions. So, I don't know which phase it is. I think it's phase 5 or phase 7. Part of building the park. Is there any remediation cost, or is there any need for remediation, or is that factored in there?
So at this point, we haven't really, I don't believe we've directed the consultant team to explore to that degree. Just from my firsthand knowledge of the yard, we do have a gas tank on site. We've gone ahead as a department and maintained those, but as a part of exploring the park, certainly the department will direct our consultants to do their due diligence. To answer your question, we don't know at this time. We need to do our homework.
So sticker price could go up, like most things in the city. So right now there is no. How much was the initial funds to do all of this?
We allocated. Right, we allocated for the study.
So there was, I believe it was 108,000, 200,000 that was allocated for this phase of studies.
And but that wouldn't include, for example, a phase 1 environmental on remediation.
No.
And then that, which is that's fairly inexpensive. Phase 1 environmental is fairly modest in price. But then that would happen, and then we would know if there's more remediation or not. So that's where we enter into the uncharted territory of when we want to bring a property into some sort of reuse. It's a good point.
Yeah, obviously this project is, this is literally just the inception of it versus like our G2 and all of the other projects we're doing. Would there be any opportunities for overlapping, or would there be any funds, whether it's federal or anything else, that we could leverage while we're doing something, while we're doing an adjacent project to get this started, or is that all just going to be a funding study?
Council member, as it relates to G2 or the adjacent parcels, I'll have to get back to you on that. What I know about G2 is that those are very specific to that site, so I'm not aware that those funds would be available, but again, that's something that certainly can come back to you as part of the overall review of funding and funding availability.
And just two more questions. Your phasing 1 through 7, I know you mentioned it was more of a logical process. can this be changed? Can the phasing be changed, or can phase one be split up into even more smaller pieces?
For sure. I mean, we weren't looking at we had a relative grain that we were looking at with the phasing, but this is our first shot at actually looking at how that would be implemented. But as it would move forward, we would have to look at that in much greater detail and understand sub phases and series of that.
Like something like phase two and phase four, where it's more demolition. 2, 4, and 6, where it's more demolition. Could that? I mean, it's a lower price tag. Would there be any benefit to do that first?
Well, part of it is once you demo, you need to find a place to put the stuff that you just demoed, because it's not all empty. There's material that needs to be housed. There are people in those buildings, and so we need to find a place to put them on site. So there's never a no, like we couldn't relook at it, but there are reasons why the demo is actually phased out over a series of stages, and increment. It's if you the numbers are, you demo and then you build, demo build, demo build. It's that kind of a process, so you can shuffle things around the site relatively efficiently without disrupting the activities on the yard. That was at least the initial conceit.
Well, I mean, LA River is a long-term commitment, so I'd be very interested in seeing the next phase and seeing if there's any funding opportunities. But I do have to admit, I am a little concerned. I mean, I am supportive of it, because obviously we want our LA River to become, as one of the constituents said, a river, an LA River. But phase one being $108 million, and I know our G2 Taylor Yard is 41 acres at $252 million for remediation. And this project is roughly half the size, but larger, higher cost. Or if we put in the purchase price, it's about the same. And we don't even have money for that project either, or fully funded for that. But even with that said, I look forward to seeing, this is barely phase one, or even pre-phase one, right?
That's exactly right.
This is just
Pre.
literally a launching
Right.
point for
So
what might come next.
Right. So which I thank your leadership on, because it's got to start somewhere. So I mean, I look forward to. I mean, obviously, like anything, we have budgetary concerns, but I look forward to seeing what the next steps are. And I too, on my side of the district, I had some community folks also worried about engagement. But I'm thank you for Councilman O'Farrell for explaining that this is a pre phase, where once we identify money and we actually start building this out, or not even build it out. I'm sorry. Planning it out,
right.
To get more details. I mean, this is just how would you call it?
A napkin sketch.
Yes, a sophisticated This is a sophisticated napkin sketch, which there's no, I mean, the park could be in a different location, a building could be in a different location. So I want to, and thank you for the reassurances to the community, and I'm going to say the same to the people in my areas who are also very excited and wanting to be engaged. They're just, I think, like most of the folks, community members who came here to speak today, which we really thank for you to come, it seems like they just want to be so engaged. They want to get more involved, which is a good sign.
And we offer that opportunity every single moment for engagement.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So, but it's, I like what you've presented, but look forward to the CAO looking for some funding. Thank you.
We're happy to report back.
Something to add? Yeah.
Kind of commenting back on the Councilmember Ru's question on the sequencing and phasing of the, which is right now at a very conceptual level. But that was kind of a study based on our understanding of, the daily operations at the yard. And this is some of the very basic and essential functions that Ricken Park performs at the yard that's very, very crucial and critical to serve the entire city. The park system, the programming, operating, the child care center, the senior centers, all of that, lunch programs, and then maintaining parks. So the idea is not to or minimize the interruption of all those operations. So that's how we kind of base our sequencing on.
Right. What big challenge is, say we have all the funding tomorrow and we can start the work. The big challenge is it will continue to function as a central service yard during the entire phasing of everything. And as you just mentioned, it serves the whole city.
Right.
So it's a real hub for rec and parks. That
So
if the operations are interrupted, then that has consequences across
Correct.
the
And
city.
services are interrupted.
Right, the services are
Yeah.
interrupted. So that's part of the tricky, the tricky sequencing of things.
And it's
Right there.
also,
Exactly right.
sorry, so it also serves as I understand it's a regional command center for natural or any disaster.
Regional Command Center.
Right.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Well, and I just want to say one last thing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your leadership on this, and to the city family for thinking outside the box, because this is actually a service yard where you didn't need green space. You didn't have to put green space.
Right. Back in
So,
the day.
right. So the fact that that you're bringing this forward with this conceptual plan with green space that is not necessarily required or expected of, it's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the city has changed. The city's needs have changed, and we're in this era where we're trying to reduce the heat island effect and, build more green space. So it's kind of this kind of represents the direction that modern society in the urban core is headed toward, with potential benefits. So it is exciting. So thank you so much. So here are my recommendations. We'll note and file the joint report from the Bureau of Engineering and Recreation and Parks. Request that the CAO, with the assistance from BOE and RAP, to identify potential funding sources for one or more phases of this project and report to the City Council with recommendations. And again, nothing set in stone, nothing, that the sequence isn't ironed out yet, but just what would it look like for funding of more phases. Request that the BOE and Recreation and Parks report to the Council with a more detailed timeline on the steps necessary to begin implementing each phase of the proposed project and community engagement. It's important that we just keep moving along because it also serves as a mutual motivation tool. I have a great sense of urgency for identifying funding to make things happen at the river. We have a master plan that's been in existence now for 11 years, and it's important that the master plan doesn't just become this lovely document with beautiful images. We actually want to make things happen at the river, and so we advance these causes literally and with motivation. Those are my recommendations for moving this forward. Yeah, all right, without objection, that shall be the order. And I thank all of you for the work on this. Thank you so much. A lot went into this, and that was very obvious. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, this brings us to our final item. Mr. Morales, would you please read item 3?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 3 is a Bureau of Sanitation progress report on the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan.
All right, thank you. And what we'll do is we'll take a few, thank you, gentlemen, thank you, ladies. We'll take the comment cards. We have a couple of comment cards on item 3. We have Vincent. I have Vincent speaking on item 3. Welcome, Vincent. And then we have Catherine Pease. Catherine Peace, maybe it's Peace. Catherine? Oh,
Good
there we are.
afternoon, Councilman.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome.
Okay, my name is Vincent Montalvo, and on September 5th, 2017, some parts of the Los Angeles River that were open to kayaking were showing E. coli more than 24,000 per 100 millimeters. This is 100 times higher than the federal limits. The current proposed protocol does not do enough to protect the health, safety, and welfare given the amount of contaminants in the river. In the water quality sampling section of the new protocol, it makes mention that the LA City Sanitation was first testing the water 5 times per month, and now will be increased to twice a week. While the increase is good, it is not enough to get a proper reading of the water quality of the Los Angeles River. The Los Angeles River is a fast-moving body of water, and when water is being collected to be tested, the time lost between the collection and the testing is days. The water test and results published would already be in the Long Beach Harbor, making the posted results misleading to the public and putting their health and safety at risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to give your comments. Catherine Pease?
Pease.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, council members.
members. My name is Catherine Pease. I'm the watershed scientist at Heal the Bay. Heal the Bay has been monitoring bacteria levels in the LA River since 2015. We're prioritizing public health as well as appreciate the benefits of access and use of the river. So we appreciate that LA Sand has taken the great efforts to make this protocol. We're excited to see the protocol. We are supportive of the increased monitoring, the increased locations, as well as increased public notification. However, we would like to see a system that is more similar to our beach notification monitoring and protocols, where basically any fecal indicator bacteria that's over the limits would trigger an advisory and notification. So in the case of sewage spills or other known incidents of that scale, we definitely support closures, again, similar to our marine beaches. We would like to see the red level triggered in the cases of known sewage spills, and the yellow level should be triggered by any exceedance of Recreation 1 standards, which includes both single sample as well as geometric mean samples. So that would be a new thing. So we would hope that those public notifications, including signs, would be triggered at that yellow level.
Okay.
Wrap it up there. If you have
Thank
any
you.
questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much. And hopefully when Bureau of Sanitation comes up, they can address some of the items that you just mentioned. And we also have, we have Steve Mejia from Friends of Los Angeles River. Mr. Mejia, do you have any comments you would like to make? I'd like to offer that to you. No, you're good? Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for your work on this issue. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we have Mas Dojiri, who is here to report from the Bureau of Sanitation. Welcome, sir. And your colleague.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember O'Farrell, Councilmember Rue. My name is Mas Dojiri, and I'm the Assistant Director for LA Sanitation. I have with me Ken Franklin, a water biologist, and quite frankly, our technical expert on LA River. That's why I asked him to be here. I'm just going to update you on the request that you made, essentially an action item that we meet with stakeholders to get their concerns and their review comments on the draft LA River water quality testing and notification protocol. Your staff at CD13 actually organized and scheduled that meeting. That meeting was held on January 24th. We met with some stakeholders, the MRCA, which is the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority, as well as 2 kayaking companies and Friends of the LA River, and the mayor's office was there, as well as obviously LA sanitation staff, including Ken and me, and Domingo. And we discussed the protocol. I kind of made a brief presentation of it, and I thought we got a really good comment from the stakeholders. Their concern was that no water body, including the beaches in Santa Monica Bay or LA Harbor, are not closed based on bacterial exceedances. In other words, the bacterial levels could get as high as they want. It's just a sign with an advisory. The only time those water bodies are closed is when there's a known sewage spill that actually impacts the beach. Then it's closed. And it's closed by the LA County Department of Public Health. And they notify the Coast Guard, the lifeguards, and they put up the signs.
Right. And conversely, if there was that dynamic at play in the river, the county would step in and close the river, yes? If that dynamic, it was the same dynamic of major
the
sewage
actual authority to close the river
Army
is,
Corps?
It's been delegated to the MRCA.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So MRCA
Because
has that authority.
This is where the confusing sort of jurisdictions come into play, because we know it's an Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction, but we also know that the county has jurisdiction over parts of it. So, but the state has granted the MRCA with that authority.
Yeah. When you say county, you mean
County of LA.
Yeah, the Department of Public Works Flood Control.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, okay, got it. Thank
so,
you.
Because of that, and because the stakeholders said that there's quite a bit of variation in sampling and testing for bacteria, indicator bacteria, we agree with that. And so the suggestion was made that in order to have a closure advisory issued, that we would need 2 locations within the recreation zone to exceed the bacterial limits, the state limits, in order to issue the closure advisory. The draft says just one out of the 3 sampling locations per rec zone. So let me backtrack a little bit. We have 2 recreation zones, one in the Sepulveda Basin that has 3 sampling points, one in the put-in area of the kayak, one when you take out the kayaks, and one kind of midpoint. And we have the same for Elysian Valley. So the draft protocol mentioned that if there's any one of those 3 exceeded, the closure advisory would be issued. The revised version now that we agreed with is 2 of those locations because of geographic variation, sampling variation, and testing variation for indicator bacteria. That would be that would trigger the closure advisory and the kind of the red signal on the data table on our website. And obviously, it's 2 or more. You know, if all 3 of them exceeded, then we would certainly do it too.
Sure. Okay.
So that's the major change.
Okay.
And I just got an email from Department of Public Health that they said that they support it.
Okay. And just a question off the top of my head, based on your presentation just now, is that an industry standard for waterways or rivers or that you're aware of?
Closures?
No, the sampling of 2 different spots.
Not that I'm
to get
aware
a clearer
of.
picture of level of.
No, I think we're the first, right?
Okay.
Ken?
We just thought of it because bacteria, they're very variable, right?
Right.
Because you can.
The water's moving and yeah.
Unlike DO, like if you take it the same.
Dissolved oxygen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Dissolved oxygen. If you take it the same river, same spot, as long as you're at the same depth, it's usually pretty close. But bacteria, because it tends to be attracted to sediment and stuff, so you could just happen to get a piece of something in there where the bacteria would be in there.
But it might be isolated as opposed to just
isolated
everywhere.
compared to everywhere in the river.
There could be patchiness.
So that's why we didn't want to close the river if just one, you happen to get that one there. So if you show it over 2 of the 3, we figured
that's an indication.
Close it, yes.
Got it.
So that was our thinking behind that. So.
Okay. Should we start with some questions? Yeah. Okay. So for clarity purposes, in the past, what type of incidences have been cause for closures? A typical incident, according to
sewage spills, known sewage spills.
Known sewage. That's been the source.
And rain.
And rain events. Yeah, rain, of course. Yeah, rain events because of the danger.
MRCA has that directive that
rain events, sewage spills.
if they see runoff coming out into the LA River, they automatically close for 72 hours.
And have you all or has anyone taken a look at the unintended consequences of closing the river to any activity when it turns out that it wasn't necessary?
You know, the way the protocol is written now, with the 2 out of the 3 in the rec zone triggering the closure, we also have an accelerated monitoring program, so that within 48 hours we have to sample those locations again.
Got it.
Generally speaking,
so it stays closed, and then within 48 hours, the protocol is that you resample.
Within that 48 hours, right.
Same places, same locations?
Yes,
same
that's
locations.
correct.
Okay.
And generally speaking, on the beaches at least, the fecal contamination or exceedances, I should say, at the beaches generally don't last more than 24 hours. So that would mean that, you know, if we take it within 48 hours and sample, most likely it would not be an exceedance.
Right. Okay. All right.
So that would be helpful for the, well, actually, for notification for public health, but also for the kayaking companies as well.
So would you say that these new water quality standards based on the protocol, are a new standard in general for recreational water use?
No, they're not new standards. These are state standards that we are following.
You're following.
That's correct.
And so the added, or the added effort, or going above and beyond, or whatever the state standards, is monitoring in 2 different locations as opposed to 1?
Having the trigger as 2 or more sampling sites within
Right.
the rec zone exceeding triggering the closure advisory.
Okay, all right, so that is sort of a standard above and beyond what the state would require that we're imposing for the protocols.
Yes, because the state, I don't,
They only require notification.
yeah.
Okay.
No closure.
Yeah. So
In fact-
we're being very protective, actually.
Interesting. Okay.
Um,
They overregulate everything else, but not this.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Sorry,
right.
that was my little, I just threw that out there. Okay. That's
Strike that
interesting.
from the record.
I just gotta say it. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Mr. No? All right. Well, what I'd like to do is recommend that we adopt the protocols that are as submitted by the Bureau of Sanitation. And thank you for your work on this. It's important to us, to everyone, all river users. So we thank you for basing all of your recommendations on best practices, current practices, going above and beyond, and taking a good close look at what the state standards are in an abundance of caution.
And we thank you.
And we can all depend on this now and have something very reliable. So appreciate that. All right.
Thank you. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you so much. And I do believe that was the last item. So seeing as there are no other items on today's agenda, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.